This is From Courtroom to Carline, the podcast where we discuss life as a lawyer and a parent.
I'm Rick.
And I'm Jenna.
Your host and partners both in the courtroom and in parenting.
Join us as we navigate the fascinating worlds of life as a parent and a lawyer. Get ready for a roller coaster ride where law meets love and where the gavel meets the car line.
Well, welcome to another episode from Courtroom to Carline, a legal parenting podcast. Today on the show, we've got my good friend Eli Dioso. He's a commercial real estate agent here in St. Petersburg. He works for LandQuest. We've known each other for more than 20 years. We went to high school together. So I know all about this guy, and he's got great stories. So welcome to the show, Eli.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing over at LandQuest.
Yeah, so technically we got rebranded to LQ Commercial Real Estate. So I went from LandQuest and now it's LQ Commercial. But basically I do commercial real estate, just like Rick mentioned. I focus in the retail sector. So basically I do a lot of tenant representation. So it could be from local to regional to national retailers and restaurateurs. And I also do a little bit of landlord representation as well. So shopping centers, freestanding buildings, and then once in a while, sales and acquisitions.
So how did you get that position?
So I started in 2016 with LQ Commercial, and I started actually in their marketing and research department. Yeah, so when I went to school with Ricky, I always wanted to be an attorney or do law school, and I always wanted to do real estate law. And then I think as I got older, I realized I was more into the aspect of loving real estate than it was the law side. So that's where my mind kind of switched over to getting into real estate. So fast forward, I joined LQ Commercial as marketing and research, working on the back end, working underneath senior associates. And then after that, I realized, hey, I really kind of know the back end, doing the marketing research for senior associates. And then I said, let's take the leap of faith and join the brokerage world. So went from W-2 to 1099 and scared me the first year.
Well, you actually helped us find our office space. So we're super grateful for that. It was our first time navigating the commercial real estate aspect of things. So it was phenomenal to have somebody that we know kind of help us through that. So we appreciate you helping us find our space.
And thank you for trusting me.
Yes.
It was a good story because this was really the only space we looked at, and I just happened to fit perfectly, and you got us what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't be happier. And just so the viewers who know that Ricky is actually my alter ego from when I was growing up and before I became a professional. So just so we know who we're referring to. So Eli, tell us, what makes you good at what you do? Do you think the marketing helped learning that first and then transitioning to the brokerage?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think learning the back end of things with marketing and research kind of helps, especially give yourself multiple traits and multiple roles as one person rather than have to go to different teams to look for these items. So when you're helping out clients, you can do the research on your end. You don't have to wait for someone. You can also do the marketing, whether it be like aerials, mapping, GIS research. Kind of learned that a little bit back in my marketing days. And that assists as well. So basically, when you're helping with retailers, sometimes they like to do maps and want to know, what's population in this certain trade area of housing, what's the traffic count on the street. So you're kind of creating these little data reports on a map, and it's just kind of a one package thing now that I kind of accumulated throughout the years. So,
have there been any deals recently that you're impressed with yourself about or proud about?
Yeah, it's actually a historic one that I'm really proud about is actually the one I did for your mom and your aunt.
Okay.
So this is actually when I was in a dual role. I was actually doing marketing and brokerage. The company allowed me to do a dual role. And at that time, I remember you had asked me, like, hey, my mom has a building on Gulf Bay Boulevard. We've been trying to sell it, but we're just not having any luck. Do you mind helping out? And I was like, oh man, I got to put the big shoes on now and actually do work, real work, and for a friend you don't want to let down. So once that transaction closed, I was always thankful for the opportunity and the trust and friendship. So,
and that sold pretty quickly compared to the previous agent. So we were very thankful that you got that job done, and we still drive by it to this day, and I think it's a medical building. I'm not sure if it's a dental office or something like that, but I know it was probably challenging because it's an old building with literally no windows. So, I guess it had to be some sort of medical building, but that was very good work by you. Switching now over to something a little bit more personal. It's my understanding that you're engaged with a date set. Is that right?
Yes. 10 years later, Christina and I are officially engaged. I'd say it happened April 1st of 2023. And then we have a date now to get married January 11, 25.
Well, congratulations, and we are definitely looking forward to going to the wedding. I was telling Rick, so I know you refer to him as Ricky, obviously he's Rick to me, but we obviously used to hang out with you guys much more before we had kids, and one of the stories that had come up is I remember we had gone to, I think it was Farm to Table when it was here in St. Pete. I was super pregnant with our first son, and we all, went out to downtown St. Pete afterwards, which obviously I'm a huge fan of, but being super pregnant's not the same. We went out to Park and Rec. Everyone was having a blast. And I just no longer felt like it was my scene anymore. So I was like, Rick, we're going to go. You guys finished the night strong while Rick and I took off. But, we see your Facebook pages a lot now with traveling. That's not our season of life, but is, traveling for you kind of how you cope with work and kind of taking a break?
Yeah, so I always told myself, I guess, more recent than others. And by the way, good story. That was definitely a memorable night at Parks and Rec. But yeah, definitely traveling, I think, coping with work, a little work-life balance. I think for me, my mindset doesn't have to necessarily be anywhere out of state. Maybe just something different than what I'm used to in my own bubble in the Tampa Bay area. Just a little bit of change, just to kind of get the mindset away from what my day-to-day activities or daily duties are. It's kind of a nice refresher coming back is kind of how I see things. So.
I remember when I called you about coming onto the podcast, you, I think, showed me your calendar, and I just remember seeing all these different colors and different entries, and I stay pretty busy, but I looked at your calendar, I was like, wow, that kind of looks stressful. So I could see why you take that time to yourself to travel. Yeah. Are there any particular spots that you like the most when you're trying to get away?
Yeah, I think for me, it's in Christine. I think just being in Florida natives, just being out west, just in the mountains, just kind of having the little peace and quiet, seeing nature, different terrain and scenery is a nice change to just Florida, especially in the fall where you get the true 4 seasons. Seeing the leaves change is a nice change compared to just what we're traditionally used to here in Florida. So, out in the mountains.
Okay. You've had a pretty challenging year, not more so involving work, but I know you live in Shore Acres and they got hit pretty hard by the storms. What was that like, trying to navigate through all that while maintaining your, hard 9-to-5 job?
So yeah, during that time, basically life has changed and shifted. It went upside down. So it was unexpected. I was actually at a conference in Orlando that day for 2 days straight. Came back that night and around 7 o'clock p.m., probably just passed out after the conference. Christine wakes me up about 4 a.m. and runs into the bedroom and says, Eli, it's starting to flood. Wow. So my mind was, everywhere, just kind of getting settled out from the conference, thinking about the next day of work while trying to manage, is this flood like really happening? And my first initial thought was, I think it happened was it Miami? There's something that happened recently in Fort Lauderdale where people were like on top of their roofs.
Right, yes.
So that was my initial thought. Like, are we literally gonna have to be on top of the roof and get helicoptered out or, have like police come and get us? So the worst was happening in my mindset. But fast forward, I ended up moving to my parents' house temporarily for 3 months in Palm Harbor. Christine actually moved to her parents' house in Lakewood Ranch for 3 to 4 months. So we had a long distance relationship. It's almost like we were in high school again. Yeah. So I told her, I said, hey, if we were dating in high school, this is technically what it would be like. I said, you'd be at your parents' house, we'd have to meet up on weekends. Yes. That's the only time we saw each other. But dealing with work was almost just like a poker face. You kind of push everything in the back of your mind like nothing was going on and kind of just have a straight face that, you just got to keep moving. So
are you guys back and settled now?
We are. Yes, we are. We moved back 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, November 23.
Nice.
So back to normal. Still worried about the floods, but we're just living our normal lives again.
So Eli, obviously I've known you for quite a while. One thing I've always been impressed about you is your ability to socialize no matter what the situation is or who you're meeting or, where you're at. So how have you utilized that skill? Because it is a skill. to help you in what you're doing now as you're at LandQuest?
Yeah, so socializing has definitely helped with the career. I think especially in my industry where you have to be in front of people's spaces, do a lot of cold callings, network and meet other people. Socializing has helped a lot. I think the fact that putting yourself in a position where you're not really comfortable with, whether it be meeting an owner of a property for the first time or even cold calling them, you kind of have to roll with the punches just because you don't know how that owner or landlord or seller is willing to, I wouldn't want to say seller, but the person you're trying to get their ability to sell or a lead, you don't know how they're going to react.
You're very personable. So I will say that you're very easy to talk to. I know that when you were negotiating the deal for us here, I don't know what the person is calling the other side where you reach out to, but I think you guys talked about FSU and things kind of just kicked off. So have you felt that that's been a strong point in negotiating those types of deals?
Yeah, so I think especially getting to know who you're, I don't want to say know who you're going against, but basically know the person who you're going to speaking with. If you can find like little information or even open the dialogue outside of work just a little bit to become more personable, I think that helps a lot and it can go a long way.
I know in jury trials, during jury selection, you get to learn a little bit about the potential jurors. And if there's something that, you can remember about that individual juror, you can try to use that when you're giving a closing argument so that you can relate to them and they'll trust you and maybe believe your side of the story. So, that aspect kind of, dovetails into the practice of law because you get to know people, see what they're about, and then try to relate to them. And if you can do that, then they're more likely to listen to you and go with what you're saying. So I'm sure that's, helped you during your career.
You're obviously still a young professional, but what piece of advice would you give to someone that's just starting out their career or, trying to figure out, like you thought you wanted to go to law school? What type of advice would you give to another young professional trying to figure out their life path?
I would say keep going no matter what you want to do. I think failing early is really important because it lets you learn what you didn't like to move forward to something else. Hitting every road obstacle sooner is better than later because I think especially as we get older, the drive and we have more responsibilities on our end where you don't have much risk that you can take. So I think taking all the risk as you're younger or just starting is more important.
The thing that I wanted to ask you is I know that you're into self-improvement. Yeah. Do you have any books or podcasts that come to mind that you have really enjoyed or have helped you?
Yeah, so ever since I was younger, I've always been an avid person of like watching inspiring documentaries. Whether I remember in high school and college watching, Steve Jobs and making of Apple, Bill Gates making Windows, just everyone, just any like entrepreneurship who started basically from like nothing or even was a college dropout or even to music where it'd be as almost like an outlier, like rappers who sometimes didn't have the, best beginnings, but you can see where they are now and very, it's almost inspiring. So I like to find inspiration in almost like anything you can or see the positive outcome of things. And I would say the book I'm actually reading right now is Never Eat Alone. Okay. And I think it's a good book where, especially in an industry where you're kind of always having to network and meet people, the book kind of challenges you to never eat alone, always eat with someone to have conversations to see where you can feed off of and roll out and maybe help be up our future. Never know where it can lead to.
I like that. I'm a big reader, so I will definitely have to get that one.
It's a good one.
So one of the things that I know you're into is investing and learning every little trick of the trade or watching, informational YouTube videos or, subscribing to channels just to take whatever knowledge you can get, apply it to, your own financial world. So what are some of the things that you've learned in the past few years that have really helped you how to sort of, have that investing mindset so that you're constantly saving money, you're constantly having something set aside for the future? I know for me, it's listening to podcasts. I subscribe to Graham Stephan, the Millennial Money podcast guys.
Strategy, well, I think starting off with strategy was always YouTube. I think YouTube was such a great accessory for us and the great, what's the word for?
Wealth of information.
Yeah. So YouTube's a great outlet for us. I'm glad we had it. It'd been nice if we had it when we were younger.
Yes.
Just because there's so much information to start investing when you're younger is always better than, starting later. So YouTube is a great source for knowledge. I think, nowadays where if you don't know how to do something, YouTube has almost every answer, or at least Google does. And I think starting off with that, I follow when it comes to real estate investment. So I'm now, I don't know if I told you, but I'm trying to learn more about commercial real estate investing in myself, hopefully for the future. But I watch a guy named Ben Mala on YouTube, and he talks about basically how to start from the beginning, what it's like for him. He started off with, I think it was a 6-unit multifamily. Now he has shopping centers throughout Florida. He's a Tampa Bay local too, which is really neat. So I think YouTube, podcast, even just with friends, bouncing ideas off of each other, I think is really important. I know, especially if you have the friends that have the same mindset as you, it's always nice to kind of just get together every once in a while, shoot a text message, give a phone call, and hey, I'm thinking about this, and you never know what that other person's willing to say on the other side of the conversation.
A couple years ago, Rick had told me about a YouTube channel, a financial YouTube channel, and I said, who's seriously watching this? I think the guy had over 1 million subscribers. And I was like, okay, well, this really is a thing. You can really learn a lot of information, on YouTube. So we definitely are big fans of YouTube channels and trying to learn what we can. Eli, we definitely appreciate having you on today. It has been a wealth of information for us, and I'm sure our viewers are going to love your stories and just your tips. So thank you.
No, thank you for both having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're looking forward to the wedding.
I was just going to say that. See you at the wedding.
It's okay. We bring the kids, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's funny because we were invited to your cousin's wedding.
Yes.
But it was no kids allowed. And I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it is. So we couldn't go because we couldn't find childcare. So I'm glad to know that we can bring our little ones.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking forward to having them. Cool. They may even be in the wedding.
Oh, all right. They'll love that. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Eli. Now to transition to what happened to Florida Man.
So on this What Happened to Florida Man, we are going to be discussing the headline of Florida Man accused of pouring beer into an alligator's mouth. So this happened back in September of 2019. It was 2 young boys, or I say boys, but I think one was 22 and one was 27.
Acting like boys.
Yes. One of them had actually caught the alligator with his hands. They were trying to get the alligator to bite their arm, and as the alligator opened its mouth, they poured beer into its mouth. So, like I said, this was back in September of 2019. Both boys finally resolved the case in 2020. They were charged with unlawful taking of an alligator, a 3rd-degree felony. Now, I have never had that case in my time as a criminal defense attorney. Have you had that type of charge, Rick?
No, I didn't even know that was a charge, but it does sound like something I would love to take on for a defense.
Yes, so now I understand why we see the signs of do not molest the alligators. Clearly, people need to know that you cannot molest the alligators. So one of the boys got what we call a withhold of adjudication, so no conviction, and a $1,000 fine. His co-defendant, the other kid, I don't think he was the one that poured the beer into his mouth, but he was still charged with the same crime of, tackling the alligator, got an adjudication of guilt. So he was adjudicated guilty. He had spent 132 days in jail, and he got 2 years probation. The difference between the two in the sentences was the one boy had no prior criminal history, and the other kid did have some prior history, so that's why his sentence is a little bit harsher. Do we see that, in our time when we handle cases where somebody's charged with the same crime and different punishment?
Yes, because in Florida, what your sentence is largely determined by what you score on the Florida sentencing guidelines, and that's with felony charges. So everything from your prior history to other things that didn't apply in this case, but victim injury points and some other things affect what the outcome's going to be in terms of a sentence. What I'm most surprised about is the jail time. I'm not sure if that was something that was imposed at the time of the sentence in terms of him having to turn himself in, or if it was a situation where he had to, or he could not bond out of jail and ended up just pleading guilty so that he could get out of jail. And unfortunately, we see that a lot in our line of work. People can't afford bond, so they end up pleading guilty just so that they can get out of jail, and in this case, on probation.
So I think the lesson here is leave the alligators alone.
Yes.
Well, thank you for listening to From Courtroom to Carline, a legal parenting podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.